The first time I held my daughter, I thought I had touched the purest form of love. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and for that moment, the world stood still. Beside me, my mother whispered promises of protection, of love, of family. But what if the very person you trusted most became the one to rip everything away? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you thought would stand by you forever, this story will cut deep. Stick around, because this isn't just a tale of heartbreak. This is a story of transformation, of vengeance, and of reclaiming what was stolen. And if you believe in justice, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive in. I was 22 when my daughter was born. Young, scared, but in love in a way that felt almost holy. My relationship with my mother had always been complicated. She was strong, controlling, the kind of woman whose voice could silence an entire room. But when I gave birth, she softened. At least, that's what I thought. I remember the hospital room, the sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint sweetness of baby lotion, the rhythmic beeping of machines, the muffled footsteps of nurses outside the door. My mother sat beside me, holding my hand as I cradled my newborn. Tears rolled down her cheeks, catching the fluorescent light. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll help you raise her. I'll protect you both." In that moment, I believed her. Because who can a daughter trust more than her own mother? The first few months were exhausting but beautiful. Midnight feedings, lullabies sung in a tired, raspy voice, the way my daughter's tiny chest rose and fell when she finally slept. My mother visited often, sometimes too often. She would show up unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. She'd scoop my baby into her arms before I even had the chance to greet her. At first, I thought nothing of it. I was grateful, even. She'd rock the baby to sleep, whispering old lullabies I barely remembered from my own childhood. She'd bring food, fold laundry, even watch the baby while I showered or napped. But there were moments, subtle ones, that felt off. Like when she would correct how I held my daughter, or criticize the way I was feeding her. "She's still hungry," she'd insist, even when I knew she wasn't. "You're too soft with her. Babies need discipline, even now. You're too young to understand what's best." It stung, but she was my mother, and I thought maybe she was right. Then came that Tuesday morning. It was gray outside, the kind of morning when the world feels half asleep. My mother arrived, smiling like always, carrying a basket of fruit. "Go shower," she said gently. "I'll watch her." Grateful for the break, I did. Steam fogged the bathroom mirror as I tried to rinse the exhaustion from my body. I was gone maybe 15 minutes, but when I stepped back into the living room, the bassinet was empty. At first, I thought she'd taken the baby into the kitchen, but the silence was deafening. The fruit basket sat untouched on the counter, the front door wide open, and on the couch a folded note with my name written in the familiar cursive. My hands shook as I opened it. Greater than, "Don't panic. I've taken the baby somewhere safe. You're not ready. I'll raise her until you can make better choices. This is what's best." My knees buckled. My vision blurred. My screams tore through the apartment, but no one answered. She was gone. I called the police. Over and over, I explained. My mother kidnapped my baby. But do you know what happens when the kidnapper is your own mother? They don't treat it peacefully. They called it a domestic matter, suggested mediation, told me maybe my mother was right. Every phone call ended in dead air. Every officer's eyes carried a quiet judgment on the status of it. I begged my neighbors. "Did you see anything?" Some had seen her car drive away. No one thought much of it. Days turned to weeks to months. My apartment grew silent, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on me, haunted by a crib that stayed empty. At night, I woke up screaming, swearing I heard my daughter's laugh. But it was only in my head. My mother had erased herself. No credit card activity, no mail, no phone number. It was like she'd rehearsed this for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were hollow, my cheeks sunken. I didn't recognize myself, and something inside me snapped. I stopped waiting for rescue. I stopped begging the world to care. If no one else would fight for my daughter, I would. So one, rebuilt myself, piece by jagged piece. I started with the law. I spent nights poring over legal texts, custody statutes, case precedents. Words that once looked like nonsense began to make sense. I took free courses, sat in the back of courtrooms, listening, learning, watched lawyers argue, took notes on their tactics. I learned how paper trails worked, bank accounts, property records, school registrations. I learned how people like my mother hide, and slowly I pieced together fragments of her life. A P.O. box were 2 towns over, a sudden property purchase under a cousin's name, a whisper of her being seen at a farmer's market 3 states away. Each clue was like oxygen. Every step forward fed the fire inside me. I became my own detective, my own leader, my own weapon. By the time a year had passed, I was no longer the broken girl staring at an empty crib. I was sharp, calculated, dangerous. And when the day came, when I finally stood face to face with her again, it wasn't at her doorstep. It was in a courtroom where masks are stripped away, and the truth becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. But that is where the real war began. I used to think the worst pain in life was loss, but I learned there's something worse: being powerless. Knowing your child is out there somewhere, breathing, growing, learning to smile, and you're not there to see it. That powerlessness nearly killed me, but it also forged me into something else. By the time a year had passed, I wasn't just a grieving mother. I had turned myself into a weapon, quiet, deliberate, razor sharp. And that's when the trail finally began to reveal itself. It started small, a document buried in public records, a property deed under a name I didn't recognize. At first glance, meaningless, but the address rang a bell. I pulled the thread harder. It wasn't hers directly, it was in the name of her cousin, a woman she hadn't spoken to in years. But the dates lined up. The property was purchased right after she disappeared with my daughter. Coincidence? No. My gut told me otherwise. I drove there one evening, a quiet house, curtains drawn, the kind of place you'd pass without noticing. I sat in my car for hours, heart pounding, waiting, and then I saw her, my mother, older, grayer, but unmistakably her. She carried grocery bags into the house, and in her arms, too far to see clearly, was a little girl. My little girl, my chest tightened. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard they shook. Every instinct screamed at me to storm the house, to grab her, to take back what was mine. But I didn't. Because if I did, she'd twist it against me. She'd call me unstable, reckless, unfit. No, I needed more than illusion. I needed the law on my side. I needed undeniable proof. So I watched. I waited. I became a shadow. Day after day, I returned. I took photos, documented patterns, what time she left for errands, what time she returned, the names of people she spoke to, and slowly I saw it, the cracks in her mouth. She paraded herself around town as a doting grandmother, telling neighbors that my child was hers. She claimed I was unstable, that I'd abandoned my baby. Lies stacked on lies until they formed a fortress around her. But even fortresses have weaknesses. I dug deeper. I found her doctor's visits, school applications she forged signatures on, government forms her hands trembling as she realized I was no longer the broken girl she'd left behind. For weeks, silence. No response. And then her counterattack, she lawyered up. Of course she did. And her defense? The same venom she'd been spreading in whispers for years. She's unstable. She abandoned her child. I saved that little girl from neglect. The lies burned. But this time, I had fire of my own. The first hearing was surreal. Walking into that courtroom, my heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear. The walls were tall, the air thick with tension. And there she was, my mother, dressed in her finest clothes, pearls around her neck, wearing that same gentle smile that had fooled me for so long. But when her eyes met mine, the smile faltered. Just for a second, she saw it. The steel in me. The daughter she thought she'd broken now staring back as her equal. The judge asked questions. Lawyers sparred. She played the part of the savior. I sat silently, letting my attorney dismantle her story piece by piece. Every forged signature, every false claim, every witness she'd manipulated, we laid it bare. And slowly, the mask she wore began to slip. It wasn't just the evidence. It was the moments in between. When the judge pressed her on inconsistencies, she snapped. The sweetness vanished. The controlling, sharp-tongued woman I knew appeared in flashes. You don't understand. She's a child raising a child. She doesn't know what's best. Her voice cracked, rising in pitch, desperate. The courtroom saw it. The facade was breaking. And as I watched her unravel, I felt something I hadn't in years. Power. Not the kind that screams or fights, the kind that sits steady, knowing the truth is finally on your side. It wasn't one big moment that won the case. It was the accumulation, the relentless stacking of truth against lies. Witnesses testified. Neighbors admitted she'd claimed my child as hers. Documents proved fraud. Experts confirmed my capability as a mother. And then came the day I took the stand. I told everything. The hospital room. Her promises. The morning she walked out with my baby. The empty crib. The note. My voice shook, but I didn't break. Tears came, but they were honest. And when I finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned back, eyes heavy with something I couldn't read. And in that silence, I felt it. The tide had turned. Weeks later, the decision came down. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Custody awarded. To me. Her rights revoked. Her lies dismantled. I cried until my chest hurt. But it wasn't just relief. It was vindication. The day I walked into that house with a court order, I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I simply held out the paper, and for the first time, she had nothing left to hide behind. Her face went pale. Her hands shook. And as she reluctantly placed my daughter in my arms, I saw it. The death of her power. But you think that's where the story ends? You're wrong. Because revenge doesn't stop at taking back what was stolen. Sometimes it's about stripping away completely. Your enemy ever built until all that's left is the truth of innocence. And that final act is still to come. When I finally held my daughter again, it felt like touching sunlight after years of living underground. Her hair had grown longer. Her voice was no longer the soft coo of a newborn in his words. Sentences, a little personality beginning to bloom. She didn't know me. Not really. To her, I was a stranger with tears in my eyes and trembling hands. That broke me, and yet it also physical victory didn't erase the whispers. At the grocery store, people stared. Some pitied me. Others looked at me with suspicion, as if maybe I had been the unstable one and my mother the saint. She had always been good at masks. The devoted grandmother, the savior, the martyr. I hated it. Hated how easily she'd woven lies into people's minds. One day, a woman from church approached me. "I'm so glad you're better now," she said kindly. "Your mother told us you were in rehab." Rehab. I had never touched drugs in my life. My hands shook with rage, but I forced a smile. That was the moment I decided it's not enough for me to win quietly. The world needs to see her for who she really is. So I started again, not as a grieving mother this time, but as a hunter. I dug deeper into her past. Old financial records, real estate transactions, bank accounts that didn't add up. I found debts hidden under family names, charities she donated to that were nothing more than shells to launder money. She wasn't just manipulative, she was corrupt. Piece by piece, I built a second case, not just for custody, but for exposure. This time, it wasn't about survival. It was about justice. She tried to contact me, of course. Letters slipped under my door. Phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Always the same tone. Guilt, manipulation, gaslighting, greater than. "You don't understand, I was protecting her. One day you'll thank me. You'll ruin her life by keeping her away from me." Each word was poison, but I didn't flinch anymore. One night, she cornered me outside my workplace, her face pale, her eyes desperate. "You can't erase me," she hissed. "She'll always be mine more than yours." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked her dead in the eyes and whispered, "Watch me." And then I walked away. Court had given me custody, but public exposure was my next battleground. I gathered every document, every fraudulent signature, every bank transfer. I handed them to investigative journalists, people who lived for stories like this. And soon, headlines appeared. Local woman exposed for fraudulent schemes. Charity scandal rocks community. The mask crumbled faster this time. Neighbors who once praised her crossed the street to avoid her. Friends stopped answering her calls. She wasn't the saint anymore. She was the liar, the thief, the manipulator. And for the first time, the world saw what I had always seen. Her downfall wasn't explosive. It was slow, agonizing, like watching a statue crack under the weight of time. I heard through whispers that she'd lost the house, that creditors forsook her, that her lawyer dropped her when new evidence surfaced. And one night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, I got a call. A relative one who still spoke to her told me she'd been hospitalized. Stress-induced collapse. Alone. No one by her side. I should have felt pity. A part of me almost did. But then I looked at my daughter's sleeping face, and the pity hardened into something else. Justice. Weeks later, she asked to see me. Against every instinct, I went because I wanted her to see what she could no longer touch. She was frail, her body thinner, her voice weakened, but her eyes still carried that same defiance. "You think you've won?" she gasped. "But she'll never forget me. She'll always remember who raised her." I leaned in, close enough that she could see the fire in my eyes. Greater than she'll remember, but not the way you want. She'll remember the truth, and the truth is the only thing you can't control. She had no reply. For the first time in my life, she had no weapon on her hands. And that silence was the sweetest revenge of all. I walked out of that room lighter than I stepped dust settled, I didn't feel like a victor standing on a battlefield. I felt hollow, because what do you do after you've destroyed the person who raised you? What do you do with the ashes of a bond that was supposed to be sacred? At first, the hardest battles weren't in courtrooms or newspapers. They were in my own living room. My daughter was cautious around me, like a bird that had learned to fear hands. She didn't understand the full story, but she understood one thing. The woman she trusted most, the one who raised her, was suddenly gone, and in her place was me, a stranger who claimed to be her mother. I had to earn her, day by day, night by night. I read her bedtime stories even when she didn't listen. I packed lunches even when she refused to eat them. I held her when she cried for a grandmother I could no longer allow in her life. And slowly, painfully, she began to trust. She began to laugh with me. She began to call me mommy without hesitation. The first time she wrapped her little arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you." I cried so hard I thought my chest would crack open. That was the victory. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, that moment. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. My mother haunted me in ways I didn't expect. In the way I second-guessed my parenting decisions. In the way I hesitated before correcting my daughter, afraid of becoming too much like her, and in the nightmares where I'd wake up and my daughter was gone again, stolen in silence while I slept. Revenge had given me justice, but healing? That was a different war entirely. Months later, I got a letter, handwritten, shaky, from her. "I'm dying," it said. "I want to see her one last time." My hands trembled as I held the page. A storm of emotions crashed over mere age, grief, pity, fear. Part of me wanted to burn it. Another part wanted to march to her bedside and scream every word I had ever held back. But instead, I tucked it away. Because forgiveness is not the same as weakness. She didn't get to see my daughter again. Not because I was cruel, but because I chose to protect my child from the cycle of manipulation that had nearly destroyed me. People ask me if it was worth it. The years of searching, studying, fighting, exposing, and the truth is complicated. Revenge didn't give me peace. It didn't erase the pain or restore the years I lost, but it gave